National Guard deployed to Washington, D.C. following Trump's order, in a swift move following President Donald Trump's directive to federalize law enforcement in the nation's capital. The deployment of National Guard troops to Washington, D.C. has begun. This decision, announced just a day prior, aims to address what the administration describes as a crime-ridden and out-of-control situation. The presence of uniformed troops on the city's streets has created an unusual spectacle, sparking a mix of relief and anxiety among residents. On Tuesday evening, the first signs of the new federal initiative were visible, as National Guard patrols were spotted in several parts of downtown D.C. The New York Times and the Washington Post reported seeing troops near the Washington Monument. Though their presence was not yet widespread, a contingent of about a dozen guardsmen, accompanied by 5 military vehicles, appeared near the iconic landmark. When questioned by a reporter, the troops declined to comment on their mission or duration of deployment, with one soldier stating they had been instructed not to speak to the press. Despite the initial deployment, the overall presence of the National Guard remained limited. Patrols were not yet seen around the White House, where anti-Israel protesters' tents remained in place, and a sense of normalcy prevailed among tourists and residents. An Army official told the NYT that troops were expected to be stationed around national monuments and near a U.S. Park Police facility in Anacostia, with more personnel continuing to gather at National Guard headquarters. President Trump's announcement on Monday outlined the deployment of 800 National Guard troops and approximately 500 federal agents from agencies like the FBI, DEA, and ATF, according to White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt. This initial surge of law enforcement resulted in the arrest of 23 individuals on charges including murder, gun crimes, and drug possession. The response from D.C. residents has been sharply divided. Some welcomed the intervention, citing a need for drastic measures to combat rising crime. One resident told AFP, "This place isn't safe anymore," expressing hope that the federal presence would bring about much-needed change. Another resident described their neighborhood street corners as open-air markets for drugs. Conversely, others, particularly from the city's African-American community, expressed concern over potential racial profiling and an increased sense of unease. One resident, speaking to the Associated Press, worried about the heightened risk of being targeted despite being a law-abiding citizen. D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser acknowledged the federal presence, stating, "We have more police now, and we certainly want to use them." However, she also voiced apprehension over the limited authority the federal district has to counter the federal government's actions. On X, Mayor Bowser reiterated her long-standing call for D.C. to be granted statehood, arguing that such times highlight the urgent need for Washington, D.C. to become the 51st state.